Okay, this should be the next part here. Of course, after all I just said about, submission and prayerfully seeking it, this kind of flows in with it. That's why I'm kind of calling it a two-parter here. Another problem that sisters have had with recovering is feeling overwhelmed with rules and regulations and another term, legalism. Personally, I think legalism is a very, very overused term. Many Christians, like Mennonites for example, they are often accused of being legalistic. True definitions of legalism, my understanding, has much more to do with believing in a salvation of works and that your works will save you, and making up things that aren't even necessary to save you. And the head covering is quite separate from that. I think there's a very big difference from obedience to the scriptures at hand and what God tells you to do, particularly in the New Testament. You are to be obedient to the scriptures. That's not legalism. There's a very big difference. You can make these things into legalism if you really try. Like, again, the Mennonites and stuff that we have fellowshipped with at times. They're beautiful people. They do have a lot of rules and regulations, and that's a huge turnoff to people. But from what I have seen, they don't take that to be any type of a salvation of works issue by any means. They just have set these things forth because they desperately, as much as anyone I've ever seen, it seems, want to follow the narrow path of God. And that's their way of helping each other along that narrow path. They do it voluntarily. It's not a thing that they feel like they're going to go to hell if they wear the wrong color dress or the wrong style dress or the wrong style head covering. It's not that at all. They've told me many times not to feel bad because I'm not a member and I wear different things. I wear different style coverings. That's not their way. They're often misunderstood on that. And that kind of brings about my point, is those of us who head cover sometimes are thought of in that same kind of light, that we're all about rules and regulations, and that if you cover, you have to cover a certain way, and you can't wear pants, and you can't do this, and you can't wear makeup or jewelry, and various things like that, or you have to be plain. I think the plain thing is a conviction. I think Scripture requires us to be modest. It requires us to be simple, and the definitions of plain can be quite subjective. I consider myself to be a pretty plain person, but in the same turn, maybe somebody who's Amish doesn't. It just truly depends. I think we all kind of have to find that and work that out for ourselves. But do I think there's wrong in doing, pretty things, maybe lace on your coverings, or wearing printed dresses, or even wearing pants? I myself, I don't wear pants. But I don't think it's sinful if it's done properly. I think it is important to be distinctive about sex. I think you need to dress feminine as a lady. I think you need to dress modestly. I think it's good if you want to wear pants, if you wear a top that will cover, your womanly areas. I think that's a wise thing to do just for modesty. But I don't think it's sinful if you do put on a pair of pants. I used to wear them, but I don't now. The way I feel about it is I feel dresses are probably the better choice. Do I feel that it's, the only choice, or it's wrong to do the other? No, I really don't. I truly don't think that. And it's not that I'm trying to give license to people not to offend them or what have you. I just truly don't believe that it's a sin issue. I think people have to be very careful, and I think they can easily creep into sin in ways easier with pants, but in ways not too, because dresses can be pretty immodest. It all depends on what you do, how tight you wear things, and so forth. I do think it's sinful to wear sexualizing clothing or things that are too tight or too low cut. That's where I think the problem is. It's not with your specific type of clothing. I do think the more feminine you can get, the better, but in a modest way. And I think that's the important thing. I mean, you don't have to have all these rules and regulations that you have to wear a cape dress, you have to wear a cap. a Mennonite style, Romish style cap. You don't have to wear a Muslim style head covering. There's so many different types of coverings. A term that I kind of like lately, I've heard a few times, modern modest. I think that's a good point. You can dress modestly and quite modern. You know, maybe, like, say you have to work in an office, you can go with a long straight black skirt, maybe a nice modest blouse, and just a simple black scarf for covering. Something very straight that's, you know, not real flared. And it would almost, you know, just kind of blend right in. And, you know, I've done that before in the past when I had to work. And you can make it look very professional. As much as possible, but you can still be very, very modest. And I don't think there's a thing wrong with that. I do believe in separation from the world. You know, we need to be as separate as possible. Sometimes when we do have those jobs, it's hard not to be. At least in our attire and stuff, we have to be careful. But frankly, a lady who walks in, she may have a business blazer on, a long straight skirt, and, you know, her hair covered with a black, very professional looking scarf. You know, she may be very professional looking, but she's still going to be separated from the world by her fruits, her actions, her heart, the way she conducts herself, her appearance. While it may blend better with the world, it's still not really of the world. I mean, if you really think about it, it's still pretty separated from the rest of the main world. It just doesn't look as obnoxious as dressing full-out Amish would. I think people will probably understand what I'm trying to say there. Obviously, I don't have a problem with dressing in a more Amish manner, because I tend to. And it's really not on purpose, it's just I prefer the plain loose dresses and stuff for the most part. But I also have skirts that are straight and blouses, and I probably want to start making myself more skirts that are a little different, you know, peasant skirt style, and that's considered a little more modern. At least it's in style, I should say. But there's other things that you can do. You don't have to have a certain style of covering or what have you. I recommend that ultimately, no matter what you do, your style of dress that you adopt, whether you adopt full Amish Mennonite style or whether you go for modern modest or somewhere in between, that you seek your husband's guidance. What does he like? What does he want you to do? What makes him, you know, pleased to see you in? What brightens his day and gives him joy? I think that's important. And the same with the proverbial accessories of all this. You know, do you wear makeup? Do you wear jewelry? How do you handle those things? The type of covering you wear, the size of your covering. Some ladies are very convicted that they want all of their hair covered. Ultimately, again, I think you need to seek your husband's counsel and go with, you know, how he's feeling and his leading and his leadership on that particular point. But there are many ways to go with that. There's no one set in stone way. I think we sisters sometimes can push like there is, but there's really not. The word does not say that we have to be a certain way. But for those of us who kind of set these standards for ourselves, don't get carried away with your rules that you've made for yourself. I think rules are a good thing for yourself, but just don't impose them on everybody else. It's kind of like, as Paul says, work out your own salvation. Not that the covering will give you salvation, but my point is work these things out for yourself with you and your husband. Don't, you know, force other people to do it. But don't assume, if you're a lady who's newer to the covering, if you see a lady dressed a certain way, don't assume that because she's that way that she'll think that you're a sinner if you wear a printed hair covering, or that she'll think you're a sinner if you don't have the same style on. Don't assume that about her, because she may not feel that at all. Don't assume because she may wear dresses only that she thinks you're sinful if you put on a pair of pants. She may not think that. She may have just made the choices that she feels is the best way for her to walk that narrow path. Things like makeup and jewelry. Generally, I've not worn it much. However, lately, I have been wearing a little makeup, fingernail polish, things like that. But usually just here in the house, and it's usually private with my husband, and it's just something I've done to just be a little more made up or dressed up for him, to make him feel special. It's not a thing of vanity that I'm trying to wear it out into the world to look better or attract attention or anything like that. Or not the attention of the world, I should say. I do want to attract my husband's attention. And I think that's a good thing, and I don't think there's wrong in that. I know many people might argue with me on that point. But ultimately, I think the makeup and sometimes even the jewelry and how you dress, ultimately it boils down to vanity. How's your heart on this issue? Are you trying to be vain? Are you trying to attract unwanted or undue attention? Are you, what are you trying to do? What's your purpose for doing something?